Hey guys! Tonight we step into the marble halls of Rome, where golden plates gleam under torchlight, and laughter mixes with the clinking of goblets filled with honeyed wine. The air smells of roasted peacock and jasmine oil, thick and sweet enough to make you dizzy. You're not at an ordinary dinner. You're at a Roman banquet, a spectacle of indulgence where the line between dining and desire is more decorative than real. You glance around the triclinium, the formal dining room. Cushioned couches surround a low table overloaded with oysters, figs, and pomegranates, the ancient symbols of fertility. Musicians pluck lyres softly while slaves pour wine so dark it looks like blood. One guest lazily feeds another grapes, fingers brushing lips in a gesture that feels both casual and calculated. You probably wouldn't survive a night here. Not because of the decadence, but because Romans didn't believe in moderation, not even as a philosophical exercise. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And tell me in the comments, where are you listening from? And what time is it there right now? Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You lie back among the cushions, pretending not to stare. Across from you, a senator, his robe slipping dangerously low, whispers something to a courtesan painted in gold dust. She laughs, not the giggly kind, but the slow, practiced rhythm of someone who knows exactly how to hold attention. A tray passes with boiled snails and honey cakes, but you're not sure if you're supposed to eat or watch. Roman banquets were performances of wealth. The more shocking, the better. If someone threw a feast where no one gasped, it was practically a social failure. Exotic dishes were expected: flamingo tongues, dormice stuffed with nuts, jellyfish marinated in vinegar. Appetite wasn't about hunger, it was about power. About showing that you could afford pleasure in every possible form. And of course, pleasure wasn't limited to food. By the second course, the wine is flowing like gossip. The slaves move slower, more daring, fingers linger. One musician's tune bends into something sultrier. You can sense that the night is just warming up. For the Romans, excess wasn't sin. It was proof of vitality, of divine favor. They believed the gods themselves dined and loved with abandon. So why shouldn't mortals imitate them? Even the poet Ovid, before his exile, wrote manuals on seduction disguised as art. Love, he said, is a game to be learned. The empire took him literally. But beneath the perfume and laughter, you can feel the tension, the unspoken hierarchy that governs every gesture. The nobleman reclines, the servant kneels. Desire here isn't just about attraction, it's about dominance. To control pleasure is to control the world. One of the guests, perhaps too drunk, spills his wine and apologizes to the host. The host waves it off with a grin. It's good luck, he says, to let Bacchus drink first. Everyone laughs. You join in, but your eyes wander to the statues around the room, carved lovers locked in eternal embrace. Their marble eyes seem to follow you, unblinking, as if they've seen this same scene unfold for centuries. The talk turns from politics to scandal. Someone mentions Emperor Nero, that infamous lover of spectacle. They say his parties went beyond anything the senators dared imagine. Entire villas transformed into pleasure gardens. every guest a performer in his private theater of excess. Historians still debate how much of it was true, and how much was Roman gossip inflated by envy. But the truth hardly matters. In Rome, rumor was a form of entertainment. Your cup is refilled again. The wine bites sharper now. The torches flicker lower. A servant passes with rose petals, sprinkling them across the couches. The petals stick to your skin, soft and cool. The scent mingles with sweat and smoke, creating something strangely intoxicating. Someone begins a game, a sort of ancient truth or dare. You watch as questions of passion and secrets are whispered into the dim air. One man admits he paid a fortune for a night with an actress. Another confesses he'd trade his villa for a single kiss from his neighbor's wife. Everyone laughs, and the host claps delightedly. The boundaries between confession and boasting blur until they vanish completely. You lean back and realize, this isn't debauchery for its own sake. It's theater. Every movement, every bite, every kiss stolen under torchlight is a statement. I am Roman. I am powerful enough to want without shame. The musicians switch to a slower rhythm now. The torches burn down, and the wine glows in the cups like liquid amber. The air feels heavy, charged. You can almost hear history breathing through the silk curtains, whispering about how entire empires rise and fall on the same kind of desires. Outside, the moon slides over tiled roofs, pale and indifferent. Inside, laughter turns softer, more private. A hand reaches for another hand in the half-dark. The banquet is still going, but now it belongs to shadows and whispers. You close your eyes for a moment, feeling the rhythm of the room, the pulse of pleasure and pretense that once defined the greatest empire on earth. And for just a second, you wonder whether Rome ever truly fell, or if it simply learned to hide its feasts better. The room fades into steam, white, fragrant, and alive. You're standing in a Roman therme, the public bathhouse where the empire's citizens came not just to cleanse their bodies, but to polish their reputations and whisper their desires. The floor glistens with mosaic tiles, dolphins, tridents, and mythic lovers intertwined. The marble walls echo laughter and the splash of water. Everything smells faintly of olive oil, rose petals, and ambition. You pay a few copper coins at the entrance, leave your clothes with an attendant, and step into the tepidarium, the warm chamber. The air wraps around you like silk. Bodies shimmer in the mist. Neither shy nor boastful. Here, no one hides. Not the senators. Not the soldiers. Not even the poets with their carefully curled hair. You realize quickly that bathing, for the Romans, was as much about being seen as it was about getting clean. Steam blurs the edges of reality. You walk past a group of men debating politics while two young attendants massage their backs with perfumed oil. A woman, clearly wealthy from the way her hair is pinned with gold, slips into the caldarium. The hot bath, her anklet jingling softly. Conversations rise and fall, mixing philosophy with flirtation. Epicurus would have fit right in. And yet, as casual as it all appears, every glance has meaning. The way someone lingers by a pillar, the turn of a head, the lazy swirl of a towel, all are part of a secret language. You can almost feel the hidden eyes behind the marble screens. The Romans were masters of what we might call social choreography. The baths were their stage. Deals were struck. alliances born, lovers discovered, all under the guise of soap and steam. You might think you're invisible in this mist. But trust me, someone is watching. Someone always is. In the corner, a slave pours oil into a shallow bronze bowl, the surface catching the flicker of lamplight. He's mixing something, saffron, perhaps, or myrrh, to scent the next bath. The scent drifts toward you. Dizzying, rich, a perfume that seems older than morality. You remember hearing stories about Emperor Caracalla, who built one of the grandest bathhouses in Rome. It could host thousands at once, a labyrinth of marble pools, libraries, gardens, and even brothels discreetly attached. Historians still debate whether the emperor built it out of generosity or guilt. After all, he had just ordered the massacre of an entire city. Maybe he thought hot water could wash off blood. In the Roman mind, the body wasn't something to be ashamed of. It was divine, sculpted in the image of gods who themselves loved openly and fiercely. The baths were temples to that belief. Every drop of water, every ripple of skin, was a small act of worship. Someone brushes past you. A young man with dark eyes and the kind of smile that suggests he knows more than he should. He murmurs something you don't catch. And for a heartbeat, you wonder whether to follow. But before you can decide, a senator's booming laughter distracts the room. He's telling a joke about a gladiator and a Vestal virgin, one that probably shouldn't be funny, but somehow is. You sit by the pool's edge. The heat seeps into your bones, and the sound of trickling water begins to sound almost like whispering. You imagine the centuries peeling back, Roman lovers meeting in this same place. Their footsteps long faded, their secrets sealed in stone. In a way, these baths were the empire itself, dazzling, indulgent, and full of contradictions, cleanliness and corruption in the same breath, piety beside pleasure. Romans could recite Stoic philosophy at breakfast and lose themselves in the steam by afternoon. A historian once wrote that Rome's baths reflected its soul, transparent only in fog. No one knows who said it, but it fits. You look around at the glittering walls, the golden basins, the people gliding through vapor like ghosts, and realize, this is how empires rot, not from filth, but from too much polish. A servant offers you a strigil, a curved bronze scraper. You take it, running the cool metal along your arm. Oil and sweat slide away, leaving skin gleaming under the lamplight. It feels oddly satisfying, like shedding not just dirt, but history itself. Then you notice a mural behind the steam, faint, almost erased by time. It shows Venus emerging from the sea, surrounded by cupids. But look closer. Among the cherubs are mortals, watching her, reaching toward her. The boundary between divine and human is gone. Desire, it seems, was never something to hide, it was the currency of life. The heat deepens. You hear laughter somewhere beyond the fog, a low hum of pleasure and politics entwined. You imagine gossip slipping between bathers like oil. Who slept with whom? Who's fallen out of favor? Whose perfume costs more than their slaves earn in a year? And yet, for all the indulgence, there's something soothing here. The water sighs as you sink deeper. The marble beneath you is cool despite the heat. The voices blur together into a soft drone, a lullaby sung by ghosts of empire. For a moment, You feel suspended between worlds, the living and the long gone, the sacred and the scandalous. You wonder whether anyone, centuries from now, will study your world with the same mix of fascination and disbelief. You close your eyes. The steam folds around you like a blanket. Somewhere, someone pours fresh water. Someone whispers a secret. Someone watches, always watches. The Roman baths, after all, were never just about washing away the day. They were about revealing what the day had tried to hide. The steam thins, and the scent of roses turns sharper, greener. You blink, the marble baths fade, replaced by moonlit hedges and whispering fountains. You're now walking through the emperor's private gardens, a place forbidden to most Romans, where pleasure and politics grow side by side like vines competing for the same light. The path beneath your feet is lined with crushed shells that glow faintly in the torchlight. Statues rise from the mist, not of gods this time, but of lovers, mortal, naked, and sculpted in exquisite detail. You hear laughter ahead, low and languid, the kind of laughter that doesn't belong in public. You've wandered into what chroniclers later called the emperor's playground. The garden breathes luxury. Flowers from every corner of the empire bloom here: Egyptian lotus, Persian lilies, roses from Syria. Peacocks strut among marble benches. The air hums with the sound of distant music, pipes and lyres weaving a melody that feels too slow to be innocent. You pause near a fountain carved like Neptune rising from the sea. Its basin overflows with water tinted by crushed violets. Floating in it are small oil lamps, their flames trembling like nervous secrets. A servant walks past, carrying a silver tray with figs and almond cakes. Eyes downcast, steps rehearsed. You realize he's walking a path that's been practiced 1,000 times. Serving pleasures that have long outlasted the people who desired them. It's said that Emperor Tiberius kept a «garden of delights» on Capri, far from Rome's judgmental eyes. Some historians say it was a place of refined art and music. Others whisper of darker things, of fountains that ran with wine and dancers trained to move like nymphs. The truth, as usual, lies somewhere between scandal and imagination. But here's what we do know, for Rome's rulers. Gardens weren't just symbols of beauty. They were microcosms of control, worlds where nature, art, and desire bent to imperial will. Every path curved the way an emperor wished. Every bloom opened under his command. When you controlled beauty, you controlled what people dreamed about. You walk deeper, following the murmur of water and silk. The hedges close around you, forming green walls that trap the scent of night-blooming jasmine. There's a marble bench ahead, half hidden by vines, where two figures recline under the torchlight. You can't tell who they are, their faces half veiled, but the emperor's signet ring glints on one of the hands. You look away, pretending not to have seen what you saw. Historians still debate the nature of these private entertainments. Some claim they were refined music, poetry, philosophy shared over wine. Others describe spectacles so lavish that even Rome blushed. There's an old saying, if a Roman whispers it, a Greek has already painted it. And indeed, the garden's frescoes tell stories that words could never safely record. A breeze stirs the cypress trees. You think of how strange it is. This balance between sacred and profane. The same emperor who commands legions also arranges lovers by moonlight. Perhaps it's no surprise that power and desire look so much alike when seen through torch smoke. One of the musicians nearby strikes a chord. Soft but deliberate, the sound seems to ripple through the garden, blending with the rustle of silk and the sigh of leaves. You realize this isn't just a party. It's choreography, an empire of senses conducted like an orchestra. You find yourself wondering how much of Rome's history was written not in Senate debates, but in gardens like this, whispered promises that never reached the scrolls. Maybe the true power of an emperor wasn't in decrees or wars, but in the way he made people want to please him. A servant refills your cup with watered wine. The liquid shivers in the cup as if afraid of what it's about to witness. You take a sip. It tastes of honey and something bitter, like memory. And yet, despite the spectacle, something feels fragile. You sense it in the way the torches flicker, in the nervous glances of the slaves. The empire is vast, but pleasure this extravagant always comes with a shadow. You can't help but think of the poor outside the palace walls, hungry and cold, while here, figs are carved into shapes too pretty to eat. You remember a Roman poet who once wrote, "Pleasure is the garden's serpent, beautiful until it bites." He was executed not long after. The night deepens. The emperor rises, draped in silk, his movements slow and deliberate. The guests kneel, not out of devotion, but survival. Power in Rome is a kind of love story, one that always ends badly for someone. You slip away through an archway of ivy, leaving behind the murmurs and music. The path opens into a terrace overlooking the city, a sea of torches. A million tiny fires burning in the night. From here, Rome looks peaceful, eternal, but you know better. Every light hides a hunger. Every shadow hides a story. You lean against the cold marble railing, feeling the breeze cool your flushed skin. The moonlight glints off the distant Tiber, winding like a silver ribbon through the city's heart. You think about how even emperors, in all their splendor, can't command the moon. Desire, after all, belongs to no one. Behind you, laughter fades. The music slows. Somewhere, a bird calls out once, twice, and then silence. The garden exhales. And you, standing there in the middle of Rome's most secret paradise, suddenly realize, history isn't made in battlefields. It's made in moments like this, when power meets pleasure. And no one can tell which one truly rules. The laughter from the emperor's garden fades, replaced by the muffled thrum of drums echoing through narrow streets. You find yourself in the heart of Rome during the Lupercalia festival, a night when masks hide faces. And desire walks openly, unashamed. Torches burn in every square. Musicians pound out frantic rhythms while dancers twist in circles. Their movements half ritual, half chaos. The smell of wine, sweat, and burning laurel fills the air. Everyone, slave and senator alike, wears a mask. Not to conceal identity, but to release it. Tonight, the rules vanish. You drift among the crowd. A woman in a wolf mask bumps into you and laughs, pressing a garland into your hand before disappearing into the throng. Behind her, men dressed as fawns chase giggling girls through the smoke, pretending to strike them with strips of goat hide, an ancient fertility rite that somehow survived civilization. The Romans loved this kind of thing. when reverence and recklessness danced together until they were indistinguishable. The masks glitter in the firelight, gold, ivory, painted wood. Each one transforms its wearer into something mythic. You realize that anonymity, for the Romans, wasn't about hiding shame, it was about freeing truth. When no one knows your face, you can finally say what you want, or take it. You step into a small courtyard off the main street, where the music softens. Couples gather beneath an archway draped with ivy. The flicker of torches reveals a wall fresco, Dionysus, god of wine and ecstasy. Surrounded by his followers, eyes half-lidded, lips parted, forever caught between devotion and delirium. You understand why the Romans worshipped him so passionately. He gave them permission to forget themselves. A masked figure approaches you, a man. Or maybe a woman. It's hard to tell. Their mask is shaped like a smiling satyr. The grin wide and knowing. They offer you a cup of spiced wine. To freedom, they whisper. You drink, and the liquid burns down your throat. Warm and dangerous. The world tilts slightly. The crowd begins to chant. You catch fragments of Latin, words invoking fertility. Chaos. Renewal. The chant grows louder until it vibrates through your chest. People dance in spirals, cloaks flying, masks glinting. You feel the pulse of the city beneath your feet. Ancient and alive. Historians still debate whether these festivals were truly religious or just excuses for indulgence. Some called them holy rites honoring the gods. Others saw them as moral decay disguised as tradition. But to the Romans, holiness and pleasure weren't opposites, they were partners in the same dance. You watch as a senator removes his laurel wreath and replaces it with a mask shaped like a lion. A slave girl ties a ribbon around his wrist and laughs. For a moment, their stations vanish. The empire disappears. Only the rhythm remains, the heartbeat of a city that refused to separate sin from celebration. Somewhere nearby, a storyteller recites tales of Venus and Mars. The adulterous lovers caught by Vulcan's net. The listeners cheer and jeer. But no one looks scandalized. They admire the gods for being so human, and themselves for being so divine. A gust of wind lifts your mask slightly, and cool air kisses your face. You glance around and realize that the street has transformed. What began as a festival has become a tide of movement, bodies weaving through alleys. Torchlight painting the walls gold. The city itself seems to breathe faster. A philosopher once wrote that masks reveal more truth than faces. Maybe he was right. Beneath these painted smiles, you sense confessions waiting to spill. The baker who envies the senator. The wife who dreams of her slave. The soldier who misses the tenderness he pretends to despise. Every mask is a doorway, and tonight, all of them are open. Someone begins to sing. The melody is ancient, wordless, more moan than song. It threads through the crowd like smoke. People sway, eyes closed, hands raised toward the night sky. The moon glows pale above the rooftops, indifferent to what unfolds below. You find yourself laughing softly, not out of mockery, but recognition. This is the Roman genius, to turn even chaos into ceremony, to find meaning in madness. To call desire by another name and crown it with laurel. The torches start to die down. The music slows. Masks are lifted, revealing flushed faces, damp hair, eyes shining with something between exhaustion and joy. You see strangers looking at one another as if meeting for the first time, though they might have shared the same dinner table that morning. As you leave the courtyard, you glance back once more. The satyr mask you wore now hangs on the wall beside the fresco of Dionysus. It grins in the dim light, eternal, unashamed. You step into the cool night air. The streets are quieter now. A few petals float in puddles of spilled wine. The city hums softly, like it's catching its breath after a long confession. You walk on, the moon following you across tiled roofs. Behind you, the last torch sputters out, and Rome falls asleep beneath its masks, dreaming, perhaps, of the faces it will wear tomorrow. The torches of the masked festival fade behind you, and dawn begins to wash the city in pale gold. The air is quieter now, gentler, though it hums with something unspoken. You wander through narrow streets until you reach the temple of Venus Genetrix. Her marble face watching from above, serene yet impossibly alive. Here, in the stillness of early morning, you begin to understand how the Romans managed to turn desire into religion. The temple doors stand open. Inside, incense curls in slow ribbons toward the painted ceiling. Priests move in silence, robes the color of rose petals, their bare feet whispering across the mosaic floor. At the altar sits a silver bowl filled with water and pomegranate seeds, the symbol of life's sweetness and its price. You step closer, and the scent of myrrh, honey, and crushed flowers wraps around you like silk. Outside, Rome is waking to the sounds of carts and birds. But in here, time stands still. The only sound is the faint drip of water from a marble fountain shaped like Venus herself, her hand forever reaching toward something unseen. You realize the goddess isn't just about love. She's about power, the kind that makes men build empires and burn them down. Venus ruled hearts, yes, but also minds. Soldiers prayed to her before battle. Statesmen invoked her before speeches. To please her was to control both passion and politics. And that's what the Romans understood better than anyone. Desire could be sacred if you dressed it in marble and lit it with gold. A priestess approaches you, her veil thin as morning mist. She carries a lamp filled with oil scented by saffron. Her voice, when she speaks, is low and rhythmic, almost hypnotic. "Do you seek blessing?" she asks. "Or absolution?" You hesitate. "Maybe both." She smiles, as if she's heard the same answer 1,000 times. Then offer what your heart fears to lose. You look down at your empty hands, unsure what that means. Around you, other worshippers kneel, some offering coins, others garlands, others only a whispered name. You realize that in this temple, the real currency isn't gold, but longing. She gestures for you to follow her. You move past the altar, into a smaller chamber where candles flicker along the walls. The murals here are older, rougher, scenes of Venus rising from the sea, surrounded by doves and nymphs. But if you look closely, you see the details the official artists left out, the mortal men reaching toward her, faces twisted between devotion and hunger. Historians still argue about what went on inside these sanctuaries. Some say the rituals were symbolic, acts of beauty and poetry. Others whisper about rites of union, sacred performances meant to mirror the goddess's own pleasure. The truth, as always, hides between incense and silence. The priestess dips her fingers into the silver bowl and sprinkles water on your forehead. It's cool, fragrant, and strangely comforting. Remember, she says softly, Venus doesn't demand purity, she demands honesty. You breathe in, feeling the scent of roses deepen in your chest. Honesty, it's a dangerous gift in Rome. To admit desire was to risk judgment, but to deny it was to deny the gods themselves. Outside, the first sunlight touches the temple steps. The marble glows as if alive. A group of young women climb the stairs, each carrying a small mirror as an offering. They place them before the altar. And for a moment, the goddess's statue is surrounded by reflections of faces, mortal and divine blended together in fragments of light. You think of how brilliant the Romans were at turning contradiction into beauty. They could worship chastity in the morning and indulgence by night, without ever seeing the conflict. To them, love and lust weren't opposites, they were echoes of the same divine song. A breeze moves through the temple, flickering the candles. The priestess hums something soft, a melody so old it might predate language. You close your eyes, and the sound feels like being pulled into the sea. In your mind, you see Venus not as marble, but alive, stepping from the foam, her hair glinting with salt and sunlight. The waves cling to her skin, reluctant to let go. Behind her, the horizon glows like molten gold. For a heartbeat, you understand why entire civilizations bowed before this image, not because it promised love, but because it promised surrender. You open your eyes again. The temple feels smaller now, quieter. A few worshippers linger, murmuring prayers. The priestess is gone, leaving only the scent of saffron and something faintly sweet, like honey melting on stone. As you step outside, the city greets you with noise and warmth. Vendors shout, soldiers march, children chase each other through the streets. Life pulses around you, vibrant and shameless. You glance back at the temple one last time. Somewhere deep inside, you realize that the goddess of love never truly stayed behind marble walls. She walked out centuries ago, slipping into the hearts of everyone who ever wanted too much, or dared to love without apology. The sun climbs higher. You smile, feeling the heat against your skin. Maybe that's the real offering, to keep living, loving, desiring, honestly, endlessly. The sunlight of Rome hardens as the day deepens, turning marble streets to glare. The scent of incense from Venus's temple lingers on your clothes as you wander downhill into the narrow lanes where shadows hide more than the wealthy ever dare to see. Here, in the dim courtyards and smoky kitchens, you begin to understand another side of pleasure, the silent one that kept the empire's pulse steady while others feasted. You pass through a service gate and step into a domus, a noble's house, through the side entrance that no guest of honor would ever notice. Inside, slaves move like clockwork, quiet, efficient, nearly invisible. One carries a jug of watered wine, another a platter of figs. Another simply waits for orders that may never come. Their eyes never meet yours, but you feel them seeing everything. The Romans built their pleasures on the backs of these unseen lives. Every banquet, every bath, every whispered secret required hands to make it possible, and those hands were not free. Historians argue about how many slaves Rome had. Some say a third of the population. Others think even more. What they agree on is this: without them, the empire would have fallen silent overnight. You notice a girl polishing a bronze mirror. She can't be older than 15. Her reflection trembles with each stroke. In it, you see the faint blur of her master reclining nearby, dictating a letter about love, politics, and property, 3 words that, in Rome, often meant the same thing. There's a myth that Roman slaves had no inner life, that they were merely tools. But in the stillness of this corridor, you feel the hum of something deeper, a quiet intelligence, an awareness honed by survival. They knew the rhythms of their masters' hearts, the timing of their tempers, the small gestures that signaled desire or danger. You can imagine a slave pouring wine while listening to senators boast of virtue, knowing every hidden sin behind their words. Imagine the same slave smiling politely, refilling cups, and storing away every secret for the day it might become useful. In this world, silence was power, and some wielded it well. There's a story, half legend, half history, about a slave who became her mistress's confidant. The mistress, a noble woman, shared her affairs, her jealousies, her political plots. When scandal came, it was the slave who negotiated the bribe, arranged the escape, and later married the freedman who financed it all. Her name is lost, but her fingerprints are everywhere in the gossip of the time. Historians still debate whether she acted from loyalty or cunning. Maybe both. In another corner of the domus, 2 male slaves prepare the triclinium for evening guests. They speak in low voices. Not Latin, but Greek, the educated tongue. One corrects the other's pronunciation. And they both laugh. It's easy to forget that many of Rome's slaves were once scholars, artists, teachers, prisoners of conquest rather than poverty. Imagine the humiliation of tutoring your captor's child, teaching him Homer while you yourself sleep on the floor. But some learned to turn knowledge into leverage. Wealthy Romans prized cultured slaves. A well-read servant could be worth more than a farm. These intellectual captives often shaped their masters' opinions, sometimes even their desires. A whispered suggestion, a poem recited at the right moment. Such subtleties could shift the course of affection or policy. You watch a steward pass by, tall, composed, his tunic spotless. The other slaves step aside slightly. Not out of fear, but respect. He's a villicus, the household manager, still a slave, but with power over others. In Rome, even bondage had hierarchies. The empire loved order more than freedom. A sudden burst of laughter comes from the atrium. You follow the sound and see the mistress of the house surrounded by friends, fanning themselves as they discuss last night's festival. A young slave stands behind her, waving a palm leaf fan. He's handsome, the kind of beauty that Rome noticed, too delicate for labor, too visible for safety. The mistress tilts her head slightly, and he meets her eyes just long enough to be dangerous. You see the unspoken conversation pass between them, the one neither could ever admit existed. Pleasure, in this house, moves quietly, not in banquets or temples, but in glances, gestures, the soft sound of footsteps on marble. You realize that for some slaves, power came not from rebellion, but from understanding desire better than those who claimed to own them. You think of the poet Juvenal, who warned husbands not to trust their wives with handsome attendants. He said it as a joke, but everyone knew the truth behind it. Rome's greatest hypocrisies lived in its bedrooms. A door opens somewhere down the hall. You catch sight of a small chamber, barely large enough for a bed. Inside, a slave sits alone, mending a tunic under the weak light of an oil lamp. His lips move silently, perhaps a prayer, perhaps a curse. The faint smell of olive oil and smoke fills the air. You realize then that this, the quiet endurance, the constant watching, is what truly kept Rome alive. The emperors may have ruled, the nobles may have feasted, but it was the unseen millions who held up the weight of the empire's pleasure. Outside, the afternoon light shifts to bronze. The household begins to prepare for another night of feasting. The slaves move faster now, polishing, carrying, anticipating. They know the cycle never ends. Day after day, life after life, the same gestures repeated until history forgets their names. You step out into the courtyard, where water drips steadily from a fountain shaped like a dolphin. The sound is soft, rhythmic, almost like breathing. You wonder if the slaves ever found peace in small things like this. Moments between orders, when the world stopped demanding and simply existed. Maybe they did, maybe they didn't. Historians still argue about whether slaves in Rome could ever truly be happy. But standing here, you feel that they must have found something, a hidden dignity, an invisible strength that outlived even their masters. The fountain's reflection wavers, showing two faces, yours, and that of a servant passing behind you. For a moment, you look the same, then he bows and disappears into shadow, leaving you alone with the sound of water and the weight of unspoken history. Evening descends again, and with it comes the sound of laughter spilling from open courtyards. The scent of roasted meat mingles with the sweetness of grapes crushed underfoot. You find yourself drawn toward another Roman ritual, not the solemn kind that pleases the gods, but the noisy, human kind that pleases the senses. This is the convivium, the Roman dinner party, where wine, games, and gossip flow more freely than philosophy ever could. You step through an archway into a room lit by flickering oil lamps. Cushions line the couches, garlands hang from every beam, and in the center, a table overflows with food that looks almost too extravagant to eat. Almost. Your host greets you with a grin that's already drunk. He gestures toward the servants carrying amphorae, tall clay jars sealed with wax. Falernian wine, he boasts, older than my mother-in-law, and far better company. Everyone laughs, though you suspect the mother-in-law joke has been used since Romulus was a boy. You take your seat, or rather, recline on your side as custom demands, and accept a cup of wine mixed with honey. The first sip is mild, the second more daring. By the third, you understand why the Romans considered wine not a drink, but a philosophy. They called it vinum veritas, in wine, truth. And tonight, truth is flowing fast. Across the table, a poet recites verses about Bacchus, the god of revelry, while a musician plucks a soft rhythm behind him. The guests respond with applause, laughter, or scandalized gasps depending on the line. Roman dinner parties were part theater, part confession. To impress the host, you had to balance wit and wickedness in equal measure. The conversation drifts from politics to pleasure, two topics that, in Rome, often ended in the same place. Someone mentions that Emperor Elagabalus once served a feast where every course was a variation of beans, just to see if anyone would complain. Another guest counters with a story of Nero's floating banquets, where the tables themselves drifted on ponds scented with saffron. Historians still debate whether these stories were exaggerations or envy made flesh. Your cup is refilled again and again. The host insists on a game, par-impar, odds and evens, played with small ivory pieces. The wager, not money, but dares. The first loser must sing. The second must tell a secret. The third must kiss whoever the winner chooses. You realize quickly that Romans were masters at disguising seduction as sport. A senator loses the first round and begins a song in a voice far too deep for melody. Everyone cheers. The next round, the hostess, elegant, dangerous, loses, and is told to confess the name of her first lover. She smiles coyly and whispers it into the host's ear instead, which earns a roar of laughter from the guests and a few nervous glances from their spouses. You're starting to see the pattern. These games aren't just entertainment, they're architecture. Each round loosens the edges of decorum. Each laugh lowers the walls between people who, by daylight, would never even touch hands. Someone suggests Elia. Dice. The stakes rise, bracelets, rings, a promise of a kiss. The dice rattle like tiny bones of fate. You throw, and they land in your favor. The host grins and nods toward a courtesan reclining nearby. A kiss for fortune's favorite, he declares. She leans in, and her lips taste faintly of wine and figs. You laugh, not because it's funny, but because the moment is absurdly alive. And that's Rome. A place where pleasure is performance, and performance is survival. A servant brings trays of grapes so ripe they burst under the lightest touch. Guests pluck them idly, smearing juice across their fingers. The poet remarks that Dionysus must envy Romans for their dedication. Someone else suggests they've turned indulgence into an Olympic sport. But beneath the laughter, you sense something almost melancholic. It's as if everyone here knows that tomorrow they'll return to marble offices and stern faces. Pretending none of this happened, the revelry feels like defiance, a rebellion against the weight of empire, against time itself. You overhear a whisper. Two men in the corner, trading secrets. One speaks of a new lover, the other of a bet placed on a gladiator's upcoming fight. Their tones are the same, eager, daring, a mix of lust and risk. Rome's two favorite currencies. As the night deepens, the lamps dim, the games turn slower, softer. Someone plays a lyre, the melody winding through the air like smoke. You recline back, dizzy from the wine, feeling the edges of the world blur. Historians argue endlessly about Roman morality, whether they were depraved or simply honest about being human. But sitting here, surrounded by laughter and candlelight, you suspect the answer doesn't matter. The Romans didn't chase purity. They chased experience. A final toast is called. Everyone raises their cups, and the host declares, "To the gods, who made pleasure, and to mortals, who perfected it." Wine spills, laughter bursts, and for a fleeting second, it feels like the whole empire exists only for this, for the joy of being alive tonight. Outside, the stars glitter over Rome's tiled roofs. Inside, the guests keep playing, drinking, kissing, unwilling to let the moment end. You close your eyes. The sound of dice. The crack of laughter. The faint crush of grapes underfoot. They blend into a rhythm as timeless as the city itself. The laughter of the dinner party still echoes faintly in your ears as you drift toward the marble steps of the Curia, the Senate House of Rome. It's night, long after the day's official debates have ended. But a few torches still flicker behind the pillars. You can hear low voices. Measured and confident. The kind of tone men use when they believe history belongs to them. You step closer. Inside, the senators are gathered not to discuss laws or wars, but something far less public and far more human. This, you realize, is the other Rome, the one that hides its passions behind silk curtains and carved doors. The chamber smells faintly of smoke and cedar oil. Scrolls lie open across a polished table. But no one is reading them. A jug of wine sits half-empty beside a dish of figs. The men here, the so-called fathers of the Republic, are laughing softly over stories that would never be recorded in any official annals. They speak of mistresses, of favors owed and pleasures bought. One senator boasts of a Greek boy who sings like a god. Another tells how he won a rival's affection by sending her a necklace shaped like a serpent biting its own tail. The room hums with indulgence disguised as intellect. You take a seat in the shadows, unseen, and listen. In public, the senators preached virtue. They praised discipline, piety, the mos maiorum, the ancient way of the ancestors. But here, under the soft light of torches, virtue dissolves into laughter. A single gesture, the passing of a goblet, the brushing of hands, carries meaning deeper than the grand speeches delivered in daylight. Rome runs on desire. One of them says, not marble or gold, desire. You can't tell whether he's joking. Probably not. They discuss the emperor, too, always with caution. Never by name. Rumors swirl. Who the emperor favors this week? Which senator's wife was seen visiting the palace gardens? Whose poem about virtue was secretly written for passion? These are men who rule the world, yet tremble over the same things that keep poets awake at night. One of them mentions Messalina, the infamous wife of Emperor Claudius, and the table erupts in scandalous laughter. Someone claims she once competed with courtesans in secret to see who could take the most lovers in one night. She won, of course. Another adds, to general applause. Whether it's true hardly matters. The story is its own kind of pleasure. Historians still argue about these tales. Were they exaggerations born from envy? Or truths too indecent to survive the history books? Either way, they reveal something undeniable. The Roman elite measured freedom not by laws, but by how much they could get away with. A servant enters quietly with fresh wine. He keeps his gaze low. But you notice how the senator's tone changes in his presence, more careful, more polished. The hypocrisy almost glows in the torchlight. When he leaves, the masks fall again. One senator, older than the rest, leans back and sighs. Do you know why Rome will never die? He says. Because we desire too much to let it. He raises his cup, and the others follow suit. The toast feels half triumph, half curse. You look around the room, the marble floors, the gilded statues of gods watching from the walls. They're supposed to symbolize order, strength, duty. But tonight, they look like silent witnesses to something else entirely. How power seduces itself. Outside, the forum sleeps. The torches of the commoners have long burned out. But the senators' lights keep flickering. The empire is built on this balance: public restraint, private indulgence. It's a delicate dance, and they know it. One of them begins to read from Ovid, the poet of love who was exiled for knowing too much. His voice fills the chamber, rich and slow. Love is a kind of war, gentle in words, ruthless in conquest. The room falls quiet for a moment. You see in their faces a flash of something almost human, guilt, maybe, or longing. Then someone cracks a joke, and the moment vanishes. It strikes you that Rome's strength doesn't come from its laws or armies. It comes from its contradictions, the ability to sin eloquently, to disguise appetite as elegance. The senators may write decrees, but it's desire that writes their history. A clock somewhere strikes midnight. The men begin to leave, their voices low, their footsteps echoing down marble halls. You follow them out into the cool night. The sky above the forum is deep blue, nearly black. Statues of old heroes stand watch, bathed in moonlight. You wonder what they'd think if they could hear what their descendants whisper beneath their names. Maybe they wouldn't be surprised at all. Maybe they'd simply smile, because even the gods, in Roman stories, had their secrets. You turn away from the Senate house, the laughter of powerful men fading behind you. Ahead lies another street, another story. Rome breathes on, restless and unsatisfied, its pulse set not by laws, but by longing. Morning seeps through the palace windows, filtering in gold over marble floors. You can almost hear the city waking beyond the walls, merchants shouting, sandals scraping, fountains splashing in the courtyards. But here, in these quiet chambers, another kind of empire rules. One built not on soldiers or silver, but on silk, scent, and the subtlest weapon of all, influence. You're in the women's quarters now, the cubiculum where power whispers behind perfume. Forget the Senate, forget the Forum. The most dangerous politics in Rome often began in a bedchamber. You watch as a noblewoman reclines on a couch draped in Tyrian purple. Her name could be Julia, or Poppaea, or Livia. Rome had many such women, names that glittered in gossip as brightly as in marble. Around her, handmaidens fuss over hairpins and jars of cosmetics made from crushed pearls and lead. She lets them work, saying nothing, her eyes fixed on the mirror. Outside these walls, she's her husband's possession. Inside, she commands like a general. Even the slaves know it. They move as if every breath must match her rhythm. Rome liked to pretend women were silent. The law said they couldn't vote, couldn't hold office, couldn't inherit freely. But history, the kind whispered in corridors, tells a different story. For every emperor, there was a woman who learned how to rule him. Take Livia Drusilla, wife of Augustus. The poets called her the mother of the empire. Historians called her the quiet blade. She understood better than anyone that Rome's heart wasn't made of marble. It was made of men, and men could be steered. When her husband built an empire of laws, she built one of influence. Every appointment, every alliance, every heir, her hand touched them all. Then there was Poppaea Sabina, wife of Nero, famed for bathing daily in milk to preserve her skin. They say she ruled him with sweetness, using charm where others used fear. She could whisper a thought in the emperor's ear at breakfast and see it become law by sunset. Her power was invisible, but absolute, and all she had to do was smile. You look back at the woman before you. She reaches for a vial of perfume, tips it gently over her wrists. The scent, myrrh and cinnamon, rises like smoke, heavy and hypnotic. A man's reason, she murmurs, is no match for his imagination. You almost laugh, not because it's untrue, but because it's too true. For women in Rome, survival was an art form. They learned to trade virtue for strategy, affection for leverage. A glance could be an alliance, a letter, a trap. Even in households where obedience was law, desire was currency, and they spent it wisely. Historians still argue whether these women were villains or visionaries. Some paint them as manipulators, others as survivors of a system that left them no other path. But power, as the Romans knew, rarely looks innocent up close. A handmaiden enters quietly, carrying a wax tablet sealed with a golden cord. The noblewoman breaks it open, scans the words, and smiles. The Senate approved it, she says softly. He must have argued well. You don't need to ask who he is. Somewhere, her husband, a man who believes himself master of his fate, just won a political victory he thinks he earned. And somewhere, in this room, she just decided the next one. You wander to the window. The garden below glows in the sunlight, calm and deceiving. In the distance, the temple of Venus rises, its columns white as bone. You wonder how many prayers the goddess receives from women like this, those who wield desire not as surrender, but as strategy. A poet once wrote, "Rome's women rule the empire by candlelight." He meant it as satire, but you suspect it was closer to prophecy. The noblewoman finishes dressing. Her tunic gleams faintly, woven with threads of gold. She adjusts a brooch near her shoulder, studies herself one last time in the mirror, and nods. She looks like a goddess, but you can see the calculation behind her eyes. Do you ever pity them? You ask softly. She glances at you in the reflection. Men? A small laugh escapes her. Only when they forget who truly holds the mirror. Outside, the trumpets of the Praetorian Guard echo faintly, the emperor arriving at the forum. Perhaps, but here, the real court convenes in whispers and glances. You step back into the corridor, feeling the weight of the air, the quiet power that hums through these rooms. You realize that in the great story of Rome, the emperors may have commanded legions, but it was women like her who conquered them. And perhaps that's why Rome's marble gods always favored Venus over Mars. Wars may build empires, but love, in all its cunning disguises, keeps them alive. As you leave the palace, the scent of perfume lingers in your hair. The city beyond feels louder, rougher, almost naive. You glance back once. The window glows gold in the morning sun, and behind it, a woman's silhouette stands still, patient as eternity. By midday, the streets of Rome blaze with noise. Vendors shout, donkeys bray, and somewhere a musician strums a lyre out of tune. But follow the sound of applause, and you'll find another kind of spectacle, one where desire takes the stage and virtue sells fewer tickets than temptation. You stand before the great Theatre Marcelli, its stone arches thrumming with life. Inside, the seats are packed, senators in white togas, merchants in linen, Slaves balancing baskets of figs. The air smells of dust, perfume, and anticipation. The curtain trembles. The play is about to begin. You take a seat among the crowd. Blending in, the opening music swells, flutes, drums, a soft hum of voices. The actors appear, their masks gleaming with painted smiles. The scene unfolds, a tale of lovers, disguises, and mistaken identities. The audience roars at every gesture, every double meaning. The Romans adored stories that blurred propriety with passion. For them, theater wasn't a retreat from life, it was its mirror, exaggerated, shameless, and utterly alive. Comedy gave them permission to laugh at their vices. Tragedy gave them license to feel noble about them. On stage, a young woman, playing Venus, teases her suitor, a pompous senator who can't tell a compliment from an insult. The crowd loves it. Every joke lands like a dart dipped in honey. A child beside you giggles, though you suspect he doesn't yet understand the metaphors about ripe figs and hidden gardens. No one minds. Romans taught humor the way they taught history, early and unapologetically. But what fascinates you isn't the performance. It's the audience. Look closely, and you'll see the real play unfolding in the seats. Lovers whisper behind fans. Eyes meet across rows. Even the emperor's box hums with private intrigue. Theater, in Rome, wasn't just entertainment, it was invitation. Behind the stage, courtesans linger in the colonnade, waiting for the crowd to spill out. Some are actresses themselves, trained not just to perform but to converse, to charm, to seduce. The Romans called them meretrices doctae, educated companions. They were as fluent in poetry as in pleasure, and many senators found their company more enlightening than the Senate itself. You recall a story about the actress Cytheris, who captivated generals and poets alike. Her lovers included Marcus Antonius, yes, that Mark Antony. They say she could recite Virgil's verses while pouring wine, and make even philosophy sound indecent. Historians debate whether her intelligence or her beauty was more dangerous. Back on stage, the actors shift into a scene of mock courtship. The suitor kneels, declaring eternal love, but his voice trembles, and his toga slips, sending the crowd into laughter. You can't help smiling. The Romans loved these little humiliations. They made the powerful look human for a few minutes. A philosopher once wrote that Roman theater was a school for emotion. It trained citizens to feel, to pity, to desire, to laugh at themselves. The audience wasn't passive, it participated. Shouts, jeers, applause. The crowd shaped the rhythm of the play like waves shaping the shore. A slave girl beside you tosses a grape toward the stage, missing narrowly. Her mistress scolds her, then laughs. The girl blushes, but you notice the actor wink before turning away. Even in the cheap seats, desire finds its lines. Between acts, you wander behind the stage. The actors are unmasking, literally. Sweat streaks their painted faces, revealing exhaustion beneath the glamour. A woman, still dressed as a goddess, smokes a thin roll of herbs to calm her nerves. Another adjusts the strap of her sandal, humming a tune about lost love. It strikes you that these performers, so adored by day, so judged by night, live on the border between respectability and sin. Rome admired them, yet kept them outside the sacred walls of citizenship. They could inspire passion in emperors but never dine beside them. And yet, in this world of masks, perhaps they were the most honest of all. They knew that identity was performance, and performance was power. You step outside again as the final act begins. The crowd erupts, clapping, cheering, stomping their feet. The heroine, triumphant, delivers her closing line. Love conquers all, but makes slaves of us first. The audience laughs, sighs, applauds. No one realizes that they're nodding to their own truth. When the curtain falls, the actors bow, and petals rain from the balconies. The audience spills into the streets, voices buzzing, hearts warm with wine and wonder. You follow them into the fading light, feeling the strange mix of beauty and absurdity that defines every Roman evening. As the noise fades, you glance back at the empty stage. A single mask lies on the floor, its painted smile cracked by use. You pick it up, feel its weight, light as air, heavy as memory. The city hums beyond the walls. Somewhere, another performance has already begun, in a bathhouse, a garden, a palace. The Romans never stopped acting. They just changed costumes. You set the mask down gently, hearing your own footsteps echo across the stone. Rome applauded itself that night, for its wit, for its vice, for the brilliance of pretending that they were ever different things. By dusk, the hum of the city softens, replaced by music that doesn't belong to any one house. The sound rises from every street and square, tambourines, flutes, laughter, a wild, rhythmic pulse that makes even the marble seem to sway. Tonight is Saturnalia, the festival when Rome forgets its own reflection. You join the crowd as it spills into the forum. The air smells of roasted chestnuts, pine resin, and wine gone sweet in the cold. Strings of ivy hang between columns. Everywhere, people are shouting greetings. Io Saturnalia, a cry that once meant, "Hail the Golden Age," but now means, "Let chaos reign." The rules of Rome have been overturned. For 1 week, masters serve slaves, senators pour wine for beggars, and even the strictest matrons wear garlands of green. The empire pretends to remember a time before rank and duty, before law itself, and it does so with perfect, glorious hypocrisy. You see a senator staggering past, laughing as he carries a tray of bread loaves. His slave lounges on a couch, accepting the offering with mock solemnity. The bystanders cheer. For this brief inversion, everyone feels lighter, as if freedom can be borrowed for 7 days at a time. The Romans were brilliant at such illusions. Saturnalia wasn't rebellion, it was release. They understood that to preserve order, you must occasionally let the world burn just enough to feel alive again. You move deeper into the festival. Dancers whirl around bonfires, their shadows flickering across temples. A flute player balances on a fountain's edge, serenading a group of girls with hair unpinned. Dice clatter on paving stones. Children steal pastries from trays and no one scolds them. The city feels young again. At one stall, you see clay figurines for sale, tiny gods, lovers, animals, even phalluses tied with red string. The merchant winks. For luck, he says. You buy one without asking what kind. In Rome, luck wears many faces. Historians still debate whether Saturnalia was truly a festival of freedom or just another way to remind people who held the leash. But watching the city now, you can feel the collective heartbeat, the joy of pretending, if only for a night. That power can be equal. That pleasure can be shared without consequence. A group of young men pass carrying torches, singing hymns to Saturn, god of time and harvest. Their song is drunken and beautiful, a promise that one day the old god will return, bringing a world where no one owns or serves. You suspect they don't believe it, but tonight, belief isn't required. You wander toward the Sabura, the lower district where the festival grows rowdier. The taverns overflow. Music drowns conversation. A woman in a crown of ivy offers you a cup of spiced wine. Drink, she says. You're free tonight. You laugh and do as told, though freedom tastes suspiciously like cinnamon and risk. In a corner, a troupe of actors performs impromptu scenes, crude, clever parodies of emperors and gods. The crowd howls with laughter, tossing coins and grapes. You recognize the boldness of it. Mocking power was forbidden any other day. But during Saturnalia, even the gods are expected to take a joke. The night deepens. A cold wind moves through the streets. But no one feels it. Fires blaze higher. Somewhere, someone releases a dove into the air. And for a moment, all eyes follow it, a small white speck rising above the chaos, vanishing into the dark. You pause on the steps of a temple, watching the laughter, the music, the unrestrained joy. It's beautiful and a little sad, because you can feel it already slipping away. Tomorrow, the garlands will wilt, the slaves will bow again, the masks will return to their rightful faces. A philosopher once wrote, Saturnalia proves that even in freedom, Romans serve their habits. You wonder if he's right. Yet looking around, you can't help admiring the courage of a people who celebrated joy even knowing it was temporary. A man beside you, drunk, smiling, hands you his cup. To Saturn, he says, and to forgetting, you clink cups and drink. The wine burns, the stars spin, and the city's boundaries dissolve. For a few heartbeats, Rome feels infinite, its vices forgiven, its hierarchies erased. You imagine the gods watching from Olympus, amused, maybe envious, that mortals can still find happiness in the ruins of order. When the fires die down and the singing fades, you make your way through the quiet streets. The marble gleams faintly under the moon, littered with ivy and empty cups. A dog sleeps beside a toppled statue. Somewhere, a flute plays one last tune before the dawn. You smile to yourself. Saturnalia always ends the same way, not with silence, but with the soft sigh of a city returning to its mask. Rome will wake tomorrow pretending nothing happened. But tonight, for one precious evening, it remembered what it felt like to be free. The last echoes of Saturnalia fade, and Rome exhales. The streets still smell faintly of smoke and wine, but the city is sobering up, wrapping itself once more in its familiar cloak of discipline and decorum. Still, beneath the marble calm, desire simmers, never gone, merely disguised, and in a city obsessed with control. Nothing is more tempting than a promise to command the heart. Welcome to the world of Roman love potions, the empire's quiet obsession. You find yourself in a narrow alley near the Aventine Hill, where perfume sellers and apothecaries cluster. The air is thick with aromas, rose oil, myrrh, cinnamon, and something darker, something sharp and metallic. like secrets ground into dust. Behind a curtain of beads, an old woman grinds herbs in a bronze mortar. Her eyes flick up, steady and knowing. You want passion, she says, before you can speak, or peace? You hesitate. She chuckles. Everyone says passion, she murmurs, until they learn how much it costs. On her shelves lie tiny jars labeled with words that sound half medical, half magical. Silphium, opobalsamum, malum persicum. Some are powders, others liquids, and a few, she warns, are better left unopened. The Romans were scientists, yes, but they were also dreamers. To them, chemistry and love were cousins. You lift a vial filled with something golden. What does this do? You ask. She smiles, makes a man see your face in every reflection. It sounds poetic, dangerous, and very Roman. Historians still debate whether these love potions truly worked. Some were harmless perfumes, honey, saffron, and wine. Others contained mandrake, henbane, or nightshade, substances that blurred the line between enchantment and poison. A few recipes even included more scandalous ingredients: bits of hair, drops of blood, or ashes from a lover's discarded tunic. Desire, after all, thrives on ritual. One famous recipe from Ovid's time warned users to stir with care. For love and madness share a cup. That warning, like most good advice, went largely ignored. The old woman hands you a small vial sealed with wax. This one, she says, is for memory, the strongest kind of love. You open it carefully. The scent is both sweet and strange, like figs ripened under storm clouds. How does it work? You drink it, she says, and you never stop seeing the one you lost, even when you close your eyes. You shiver. In Rome, love was not simply pleasure, it was illness. Religion, performance. They had words for every shade of it: amor, cupiditas, libido, furor. Poets like Catullus and Propertius made careers of suffering beautifully. The apothecaries simply gave that suffering flavor. You step outside again, the vial warm in your hand. Around you, the marketplace hums with life. Lovers argue near the fountain. Soldiers flirt with flower sellers. A slave discreetly slips a note to her master. Rome never really sleeps, it just changes masks. A young man rushes past, clutching a sprig of rue, an herb said to banish unwanted passion. He looks terrified, as though desire were a curse he's desperate to unlearn. You wonder if he'll succeed. Probably not. No one ever does. As you walk, you think of how the empire turned even longing into commerce. There were potions to inflame desire, others to kill it, some to keep faith alive, and others to make forgetting easier. In every case, the Romans tried to outsmart the heart, and failed spectacularly. There's a story about a senator's wife who fell in love with a gladiator. To cure herself, she drank a potion meant to dull her affection. It worked too well, she forgot her husband instead. The scandal made it all the way to the emperor, who reportedly laughed and said, "Perhaps she drank the better cure." You can't help smiling. Rome was many things: cruel, brilliant, decadent, but never without irony. The sun dips low, painting the city in amber. The air smells of spice and smoke. You pass a shrine to Venus Cloacina, the purifier, goddess of both love and sewers. The Romans, pragmatic as ever, understood that passion and filth often flowed from the same source. You pause at the edge of the Tiber. The river glitters like liquid bronze, carrying reflections of the city's countless lights. You uncork the vial. Its scent rises, faint and haunting. You think of the lovers who once walked these banks, trading promises and potions alike. For a moment, you almost believe, you almost want to drink. But instead, you let a single drop fall into the water. It ripples outward, vanishing into the current, like every spell Rome ever cast on itself. Because maybe that was always the true magic here, not the potion, but the hope that something, anything, could make love obey reason. You watch until the ripples fade. The city hums softly behind you. Somewhere, a poet is composing another ode to heartbreak. Somewhere, an apothecary is sealing another vial. And somewhere, someone is whispering a prayer not to Venus, but to chemistry. In Rome, desire was a science, and science, inevitably, became desire. The last traces of the festival fade, and Rome returns to its nightly rhythm, a quieter, darker pulse beneath the clamor of the day. You step out into the streets just after sunset, and the city seems to hold its breath. This is not the Rome of marble and daylight, this is the Rome of whispers. The lamps along the Via Sacra flicker weakly, their flames guarded by small clay bowls. You can smell olive oil and smoke, hear sandals scrape against stone, the occasional jingle of a coin purse tucked hastily away. The moon spills silver over rooftops, turning even the filth into something almost beautiful. By day, Rome boasts of its virtue. By night, it bears its contradictions. You start walking, and the city slowly reveals its other face. The taverns wake first. Through half-open doors, laughter seeps out like perfume. Inside, merchants drink with sailors, slaves gamble with guards, and women, too boldly painted for polite society, recline like queens of shadow. A flute wails from somewhere deep within, thin and pleading. A man beckons you toward a table. He offers wine sweetened with honey, gestures to the girl beside him, and grins. All Rome is equal after dark. He says, he's wrong, of course. But you drink anyway. The wine tastes of figs and regret. The Romans loved their darkness as much as their light. Night was freedom, from rank, from reason, from the eyes of the gods. It's said that even the Vestal virgins, symbols of purity, sometimes slipped out in disguise, trading piety for a few hours of anonymity. Historians still argue whether it's true. Maybe it doesn't matter. In Rome, truth and rumor shared a bed. You pass through the Suburra, the city's densest quarter, a tangle of alleys that never sleeps. The air is thick with smoke and the scent of bread baking, sweat, and perfume that tries too hard to hide both. You see silhouettes at every corner, a soldier whispering to a courtesan, a pickpocket shadowing a drunk, a poet muttering verses to himself because inspiration always keeps strange hours. Overhead, laundry lines sway like ghosts. From a balcony, someone pours water, or maybe wine, into the street below. It splashes near your feet. You glance up, half expecting an apology, but the shutters close before you can see who threw it. Rome's nights are full of unfinished stories. You stop by a public fountain. The marble face of Neptune stares down, chipped but still proud. Two boys crouch beside it, filling jars. They can't be older than 12. But their movements are already practiced, the quiet choreography of survival. When they notice you watching, one grins, missing a tooth. Thirst never sleeps, he says. You drop a coin in his jar. He nods like a merchant sealing a deal. Beyond the fountain, the streets open into the Esquiline market, the heart of Rome after midnight. Vendors shout under torchlight, selling bread, olives, amulets, and things better left unnamed. A blind man sings of Venus and Mars. A woman sells roses from a basket, their petals bruised but fragrant. Lovers buy them without bargaining, pressing the flowers between palms as if to seal a promise. You wander on. The Tiber gleams ahead, winding through the city like a serpent of light. Along its banks, you find the oldest trade of all, shadows draped in silk. Calling softly to passers-by, they lean against pillars carved with prayers, offering both comfort and sin with the same practiced smile. You think of how Rome worships beauty in every form, even when it costs too much. Somewhere nearby, a door slams, followed by laughter that turns quickly to silence. A dog barks. The sound echoes between the buildings, then fades. The city exhales again, as if deciding not to care. You stop on a bridge. The river below moves slow, patient, as though it has seen everything and forgotten nothing. You lean against the stone rail, listening. From here, Rome's night feels endless, a living organism made of footsteps and sighs. A whisper beside you, careful. The night hears everything. You turn, but no one's there, just another trick of shadow. You smile, because the voice isn't wrong. In Rome, the night doesn't sleep, it listens, learns, remembers. It knows who loves whom, who lies to whom, who pretends not to care. And it keeps its secrets until the morning, when the sun burns them away like mist. The bells of a distant temple toll once, twice. You start walking again, passing rows of shuttered shops, abandoned carts, and the faint trace of perfume left by someone who turned a corner too quickly. You think of how daytime Rome builds its glory from stone, but nighttime Rome builds its stories from silence. Both are immortal, but only one feels alive. At the end of the street, a baker opens his shutters. The first sign of dawn. The smell of bread rolls out, warm and forgiving. The city begins to stir. Workers yawn, slaves hurry, merchants count their coins. The spell breaks. You look back once more at the street you came from, the alleys, the laughter, the shadows. The night fades, but not completely. You know it will return, waiting beneath the surface like an old lover who never really left. Because in Rome, darkness isn't the opposite of light. It's what makes the light worth chasing. The first light of dawn creeps across Rome, soft and gold, touching the temples and courtyards as if to cleanse them of the night before. But no amount of sunlight can wash away the truth, that in the empire of pleasure, punishment always walked beside it. You wander through the forum, still damp from last night's rain. The marble glistens like polished bone. Vendors are setting up their stalls again, pretending the city hasn't spent the night sinning. Rome is good at forgetting. It must be, otherwise it could never survive itself. But some things Rome didn't forget. The empire may have worshipped indulgence, but it feared the loss of control. And so, for every excess, there was a penalty, for every forbidden joy, a spectacle of pain. You stop near the base of the Capitoline Hill. A small crowd has gathered, whispering. At the center stands a wooden post, dark, stained, worn smooth from centuries of use. A prisoner is bound to it. A thin man in a torn tunic. His crime? Adultery. Or perhaps seduction. Or maybe just being caught. The Romans rarely punished desire itself. They punished the embarrassment of it. A magistrate reads from a scroll, his voice flat and rehearsed. Let this man be reminded that pleasure ungoverned is ruin. The words sound noble, almost poetic, until you notice the smirk on the faces of those watching. They're not disgusted, they're entertained. Rome's punishments were performances, and its audiences were insatiable. At the edge of the crowd, a woman drops a coin into the hand of a guard. In exchange, she's allowed to spit on the prisoner. The guard pockets the coin without looking. You wonder who she's angrier at, the man before her, or the law that lets her watch. Historians still argue about whether Roman justice was cruel or simply efficient. Public humiliation was cheaper than prisons, and far more theatrical. To a city raised on gladiators and tragedies, pain was just another kind of art. You turn away from the scene, following the sound of hammering down a side street. There, workers are building the frame for an upcoming festival, decorations, banners, platforms, but beneath the scaffolding, you see the dark stains of older events, executions, floggings, spectacles long erased from memory but not from stone. It's strange how the same city that built temples to Venus could also perfect torture as entertainment. Pleasure and pain, it seems, were not opposites here, they were neighbors. Consider the Emperor Caligula, who made cruelty a form of play. He'd invite guests to banquets, then suddenly order the execution of someone at the table for bad conversation. The others were expected to continue eating. Historians disagree whether those stories are exaggerated, but even the rumors reveal what mattered most to Rome, not morality, but control. You pass a fountain shaped like a lion's head, water trickling lazily from its mouth. Someone has scrawled graffiti beneath it. Fortune loves the daring. You almost laugh. In this city, daring was both the path to glory and the shortcut to death. But punishment wasn't always about blood. Sometimes, it was quieter: exile, disgrace, forgetting. Poets who wrote too honestly about desire found themselves banished to cold northern provinces. Ovid, the master of love's language, died far from Rome, whispering verses to an indifferent sea. His crime was a poem and a mistake. No one ever said which was worse. You reach the Colosseum as the sun climbs higher. The arena glows gold, majestic and monstrous all at once. It's empty now, but you can still feel the ghosts of its audience, tens of thousands roaring as men died for sport. Here, the empire turned punishment into theater, cruelty into ritual. Even mercy had to be performed publicly. For effect. You walk the tunnels beneath the arena, where prisoners once waited. The air is cool, still, carrying the faint scent of iron and dust. You imagine the moments before the gate opened, the silence, the heartbeat, the awareness that your death was about to become someone else's pleasure. Maybe that's the secret thread tying all of Rome together: pleasure. Observed, whether in bed or in blood. The Romans understood the thrill of watching. You climb back into the light. Outside, a priest of Mars passes by, his red cloak bright against the marble. Behind him trail children, laughing, throwing petals. Life goes on. Rome never mourns for long. As you stand in the sunlight, you think about the city's contradictions, how it punished the same passions it celebrated, how it built monuments to both desire and discipline. It's almost as if Rome itself was addicted to the balance. Too much restraint led to boredom. Too much freedom to chaos. A breeze stirs the dust around your feet. The sounds of the marketplace swell again, vendors shouting, coins clinking, the endless rhythm of survival. Somewhere behind you, the post on the hill stands empty, ready for the next performance. You wonder, not for the first time, whether the Romans were truly more brutal than the rest of us, or simply more honest about enjoying it. The sunlight feels hot now, almost accusatory. You turn away, walking toward the shade of a narrow street, leaving behind the echo of cheers that history has never quite managed to silence. Because in Rome, pleasure was power, but punishment was proof that power still belonged to someone else. And that, perhaps, was the cruelest pleasure of all. The roar of the arena fades behind you, replaced by the low hum of prayers rising from the forum. It's midday now, the hour when even the stones seem to shimmer with heat. You walk toward the house of the Vestals, the sanctuary that once stood at the empire's moral center. After the chaos of Saturnalia, the potions, the laughter, it feels almost surreal to stand before Rome's purest order of women. Almost. The courtyard is serene, fountains murmuring, doves circling lazily above, statues of former Vestal virgins line the path, their faces worn smooth by centuries, their marble eyes unreadable. The air smells faintly of ashes and lilies. You can hear the steady crackle of the sacred fire that never went out, the eternal flame of Vesta, goddess of the hearth. You step inside. The walls are cool, the light soft. For centuries, this was the beating heart of Rome, tended not by generals or emperors, but by 6 women sworn to chastity and duty. Their task was simple: keep the flame burning. If it died, Rome itself was believed to perish. They were symbols of purity, yet surrounded by whispers. A Vestal's life began early, chosen as a child, removed from her family, trained in silence and ritual. She served for 30 years, 10 in learning, 10 in tending, 10 in teaching. She could own property, make wills, even free slaves, rights few Roman women had. Senators bowed to her, crowds parted at her approach. But for all that privilege, she lived inside invisible chains. One forbidden act could turn devotion into doom. You stop before the main altar, where the flame dances behind bronze grills. Its light flickers across the frescoes, scenes of Rome's founding, of gods watching mortals with detached amusement. But there's another story painted in subtler tones, one rarely told aloud: the story of a Vestal who broke her vow. Her name, they say, was Aemilia, or maybe Cornelia. The records are blurred. Deliberately, she fell in love, or was seduced, depending on who you ask. When the priests discovered her secret, they declared her unholy. Her lover was flogged to death in the Forum. She was buried alive beneath the earth. Not as punishment, the high priest claimed, but to return her to the goddess she betrayed. You close your eyes. You can almost hear the sound, the crowd murmuring, the shovel scraping, the earth closing over breath. Historians still debate whether these tales were true or symbolic. Morality plays invented to keep the rest obedient. Yet the whispers persist. And perhaps that's the point. Power in Rome never needed truth, only spectacle. You move deeper into the compound. One of the younger priestesses, barely more than a girl, kneels by the fountain, scrubbing a bronze bowl until it gleams. Her expression is calm, but her hands move too quickly, as if scrubbing something she can't name. When she glances up, you see it in her eyes: curiosity, fear, maybe longing. Does it ever go out? You ask, nodding toward the sacred flame. She hesitates. The fire? Yes. Her lips curve into the faintest smile. Only when no one's watching. The words hang in the air like smoke, innocent, yet dangerous. The Romans built their identity on the idea that purity could be guarded like treasure. But purity is a fragile empire. Desire seeps through walls, through vows, through centuries. The Vestals, for all their holiness, were still human, and humans dream. You walk through their living quarters, small, orderly rooms with stone beds, oil lamps, and shelves of scrolls. One corner holds tiny charms, carved doves, polished seashells, little gifts from families long gone. The simplicity feels almost peaceful, until you remember the price. In Rome, virtue wasn't freedom, it was performance. A woman's honor could elevate her city, but never herself. Even the Vestals, those paragons of chastity, were ultimately tools of the state. Living offerings to a god of fire. A gust of wind slips through the corridor, making the flame dance higher. You watch it twist and shimmer. Hypnotic. How strange. You think, that something so delicate once defined an empire's fate. There's a legend that during the final days of Rome, as the barbarians approached the gates, the last Vestal refused to flee. She stayed by the altar, tending the flame until the soldiers stormed in. No one knows her name. Some say the invaders found only ashes. Others say the fire was still burning. You step back into the courtyard. The sun is setting now, painting the statues in rose and gold. For a moment, you could almost believe they're alive, whispering, watching, remembering. You think of those nameless priestesses, trapped between reverence and rumor. History calls them pure, but their silence feels heavier than sin. Perhaps that's why their faces were carved so smooth, to hide the contradictions that Rome could never admit. As you leave, you glance over your shoulder. The flame flickers behind its screen, steady and eternal, or pretending to be. You realize that Rome's greatest illusion wasn't its power or pleasure. It was its belief that purity could exist without desire burning quietly beneath it. The night gathers. The last echo of prayer fades. Somewhere, the sacred fire sighs, still alive, still hungry. And you can't help but wonder how many hearts were buried to keep it lit. Night falls heavy over Rome again, but this time, it's not the quiet of prayer or the laughter of the taverns. It's the kind of night that hums with the end of something. The empire is old now, bloated with memory. The marble cracks. The streets reek of too many triumphs. And the people are tired of pretending that the gods are still listening. And yet, tonight, The torches burn brighter than ever. You follow the glow toward the Palatine Hill, where the emperor's palace stands like a mirage. The air smells of smoke, roses, and despair. Inside, the great hall blazes with gold, 1,000 lamps reflected in polished walls. As if Rome herself is trying to deny the dark closing in around her. It's the emperor's final celebration, though no one dares call it that. The invitations were whispered, not written. The Senate mutters of decadence. The priests call it blasphemy. But everyone still comes. Because in Rome, outrage is just another form of curiosity. The guests arrive in waves, senators in jeweled robes, courtesans draped in pearls, generals with faces too tired for laughter. They greet one another with embraces that feel more like negotiations. The orchestra plays, the wine flows, and the air thickens until it's almost edible. You take a seat at the edge of the banquet. The table stretches endlessly, piled with peacock, oysters, figs, and dishes so exotic even the cooks no longer remember their names. The emperor rises at the far end, his face painted with calm. Tonight, he says, we honor the gods and ourselves. Before they forget us. The crowd laughs too loudly. As the feast begins, dancers glide between the tables. Their bodies painted gold, their eyes veiled. They move like smoke, bending and twisting to the rhythm of drums. The senators pretend not to stare, though their hands tighten around their cups. The emperor watches them all, smiling faintly. It's not joy you see in his face, it's defiance. Rome may fall, he says quietly, to no one in particular. But not sober. Wine spills like prophecy. Someone sings a hymn to Bacchus. Someone else recites a poem about desire devouring empires. The courtesans laugh, their voices sharp as glass. The scent of spiced oil fills the air. You can feel it now, the sense that this isn't just pleasure. It's performance. The empire is dying, and this is its funeral feast. Every indulgence is a eulogy. Every kiss a last prayer. A servant kneels beside you, offering a tray of grapes soaked in honey. His hands tremble. You realize he's watching the emperor. Too, not out of admiration, but fear. Everyone knows what's coming. The treasury is empty. The provinces are restless. Beyond the walls, enemies gather. But here, tonight, Rome refuses to die quietly. The musicians switch to a slower rhythm. Couples drift toward the fountains. A senator toasts the empire's eternity. His voice cracks on the word. The emperor laughs and claps his hands. From the shadows, more dancers emerge, crowned with ivy. Carrying torches, they begin to circle the hall, chanting verses of Ovid that once got the poet exiled. Love conquers all, let us 2. Yield to love. The crowd joins in. It's beautiful and terrifying. You catch glimpses of faces, flushed, gleaming, desperate. One woman weeps silently as she drinks. A soldier kisses another man's hand without shame. A priest drops his robe and joins the dance. It's chaos, but elegant, the kind Rome perfected. Historians later will argue whether this orgy really happened or was exaggerated by moralists eager to condemn. They'll write about decadence, about sin, about the empire's decay. But standing here, it doesn't feel like sin. It feels like grief, wild, defiant grief dressed up as celebration. Because deep down, Everyone knows this is the end. The empire that conquered the world cannot conquer time. So instead, it seduces it. As the night deepens, the emperor disappears into the garden, followed by a few favorites. The music softens. The guests keep dancing, but slower now. As if underwater, you step outside, into the cool air. The garden is lit by hundreds of floating lamps drifting on pools of wine-dark water. Statues of gods watch with indifferent eyes. Somewhere, someone is whispering prayers to Venus and Mars in the same breath. The sky above is vast and moonless, a perfect mirror of what's coming. You find the emperor near a fountain, staring at his reflection. His crown is gone. His voice, when he speaks, is barely a whisper. "We built everything," he says, "except peace." Then he turns, smiles, and lifts his cup to you. "Drink," he says, while Rome still remembers how. You drink. The wine tastes of ashes and honey. By dawn, the lamps will gutter out. The guests will stumble home, their silks stained, their laughter hollow. The emperor will order the musicians to stop. And somewhere, beyond the walls, a soldier will see the first glint of an enemy banner. But for now, the city still shines. You walk back through the corridors, past statues that seem to weep in candlelight. The music fades. The voices dissolve, and the air grows heavy, as if the empire itself is holding its breath. You glance back once more. The golden hall flickers, then dims. Somewhere inside, someone begins to laugh, softly, bravely, absurdly. Because that's how Rome ends. Not with silence, with applause. Dawn breaks slowly over Rome. Pale, reluctant, almost apologetic. The air feels lighter, emptier, as if the city itself has exhaled after holding its breath for centuries. You walk through streets littered with petals, broken goblets, and silence. The celebration is over. The empire, though it doesn't yet know it, is already a memory. The marble glows faintly pink in the morning sun. Birds circle above the ruins of song and laughter. You can still smell the night, wine soaked into stone. Incense hanging in doorways. The faint sweetness of wilted roses. Everything feels ghostly now, like an echo that refuses to fade. You stop in the forum. The great statues cast long shadows over the empty square. Where crowds once roared, only wind moves now, carrying faint whispers through the colonnades, fragments of laughter, fragments of prayer. You realize they sound the same. In the distance, the temple of Venus catches the first full light. For centuries, people brought offerings here, coins, flowers, whispered wishes. Now, the altar is cold. A single dove sits on the steps, cleaning its wings, oblivious to history. You step inside. The floor is cracked, the ceiling half collapsed, but even broken, it feels alive. You can still sense the pulse of something ancient, not faith. Exactly, but memory. The kind that clings to air long after the people are gone. This is where it all began. Desire turned into architecture, into empire, into legend, and this is where it ends. You touch the marble pillar, cool and damp under your fingers. For a moment, you imagine the voices that once filled this space, the poets, the lovers, the priests, the sinners. Their words still hum faintly in the air. You can almost hear them. Beauty is power, love is law, everything ends and begins again. Rome's pleasures were never just indulgence. They were defiance, a way to say, "We are alive, and that must be enough." Even in their excess, the Romans understood something eternal, that to feel deeply, even foolishly, is to leave a mark that time can't quite erase. Outside, the city stirs awake. Children chase each other between the columns. A merchant sets out figs on a tray. Life, as always, refuses to stop. You think of all you've seen, the feasts and the flames, the priests and the courtesans, the laughter and the cruelty. Every scene a reflection of the same truth. Desire built this world as surely as marble and blood did. It fueled art, ambition, conquest, love. It also destroyed them all. But without it, there would have been no Rome to remember. Historians will write of emperors and wars, of borders drawn and lost. But here, standing among the ruins, you know the real story was always simpler and more human. The story of wanting. A breeze drifts through the temple, stirring the dust. You hear a faint chime as a bronze lamp sways on its chain. Light catches its rim, soft, trembling, before it settles again. You close your eyes. For a heartbeat, you can feel it all at once. The laughter from the banquets, the music from the baths, the warmth of the gardens, the prayers of the vestals, the hush before the final feast. Centuries collapsing into one long, lingering sigh. Then it fades. The wind grows quieter. The sunlight softens. Rome stands silent, dignified, and tired, but not dead. You realize now that empires don't die. They dissolve into the people who remember them. And somewhere, in every act of love, every whisper of longing, every breath taken in beauty, Rome still lives. You take one last look at the temple before turning away. Behind you, the marble glows pale as bone. Ahead, the city stretches into mist. You walk, and with each step the echoes grow fainter, until they're no longer voices, but rhythm, a heartbeat, a hush. The story has ended, but its warmth lingers, like embers refusing to die. You smile, almost involuntarily, because even after all the decadence and ruin, the cruelty and beauty, the one truth that remains, the one Rome always understood, is this: desire endures. It whispers through stone. It hums beneath memory. It survives every empire. And somewhere, even now, under another sky, another civilization is learning the same lesson all over again. So let the lights dim. Let the city rest. The story has been told. And still it breathes. End of script. Sweet dreams.